Hi, Gary Stearman. Welcome to another update from Prophecy Watchers. And sitting at my left, author Cris Putnam. And by the way, we've spoken about his book before. It's called The Supernatural Worldview, but we're going to home in on one particular part of this book, Cris, and I don't think we've ever really talked about the opening of the book. It's sort of the leader. It's an amazing story that appears in the supernatural worldview.
Absolutely. And, I called it Paranormal Witness to Gospel Witness because I first heard the story by watching the television show Paranormal Witness. Now, there's so many supernatural TV shows on now that's part of why I wrote the book. I mean, the increase in the interest in supernatural is obvious. There's 20 or 30 different ghost hunting shows on TV now.
Sure.
The reason why I thought Paranormal Witness is one of the more credible ones is that they take pre-existing stories from people who've already experienced these things and they dramatize them and they present them. And I think that's a lot more accurate way of telling these things than expecting to go out and capturing live footage of ghosts every week. Because these things don't typically perform on demand.
Yeah,
okay?
Absolutely.
But this story was really interesting in another aspect is there were so many different paranormal phenomena associated with it. And it challenges maybe some of the sacred cows of the church. And that would be the belief that all ghosts are demons. Okay, and I challenge that idea. And I'll tell you why. The way the story goes, there's a young lady, Christine Skubish, a little son, Nicky. These are real people. This really happened. There's an accident report. This is all in the book, newspaper articles. It's documented. She was traveling to a new home, several days away, had a several-day drive. Along the way, she ran off the road, went over an embankment. She died on impact. Nick was 3 years old. Okay, the car's like 40 yards off the road down in a gully. No one can see it. It's on a place called Bullion Bend up in Northern California. So Nick's 3 years old. His mom's dead. He's sitting in this car. No one can find him. It's 103 degrees every day during the day, in the desert. It's a pretty hopeless situation for this young boy, okay? Well, some weird stuff starts happening. Number one, his aunt, Karen Nichols, who was never interviewed by Unsolved Mysteries covered this story, Paranormal Witness covered this story, but she would never agree to be interviewed because Karen's a Christian. And she didn't think that those shows were going to serve Christ. And so when I approached her, I told her that I was writing this book from a Christian worldview, and she agreed to let me interview her. And so this is the first time you'll ever hear the story from her. And she was having dreams about this accident the day it happened. She knew something was wrong. And she even heard from her dead sister.
In other words, she was tuned in to some kind of a channel on the other side, as we might say.
She said she saw Christine, standing in like broken glass and bent steel. And she said, "Are you alive?" And she said, "No, but Nick, yes, find him." So Karen is desperate to say, "We have to go find them. Something's wrong." And nobody even knows the accidents occurred at this point. Okay.
Or where it is.
She doesn't even have a car. They have to rent a car. But while that's going on, okay, people are driving by the scene of the accident and calling the police, reporting seeing a naked woman walking up and down the side of the road or laying on the side of the road. There was up to 3 witnesses, and they were verified by the Highway Patrol. Actually, Officer Jack Greenwood of the California Highway Patrol verified these reports as well. It's on the TV shows. They even have some of the Sheriff's Department guys talking about it. People were reporting seeing a naked woman who matches the description of the dead mother in pretty exact detail. So we have Christine having these dreams, hearing from her. She's searching for Nick. People are driving by the scene of the accident, seeing what appears to be a ghost. Now, I also contacted Nick, who's now 22 years old, so this happened a while back. Nick reported seeing figures of light by the car every night. Of course, they sound much like what we would call angels. And he said there was 2 by the car, there was 1 up at the road.
Wow.
Yeah, and he remembers this. He was 3 years old. He doesn't remember the days at all. He only remembers being awake at night. So apparently he slept during these 103-degree days. He didn't have any food or water, but he survived for 5 days that way.
That's amazing.
How did they find him? Well, people kept seeing this naked woman. Finally, one of the police officers just, got tired of it and went out there and they started searching and they found Nick's shoe. Right as they find Nick's shoe, Karen in her rented car and her husband pull up at the exact same time and they find the car. And there's Nick and he's almost dead. And they take him to the hospital, they save his life. I talked to Nick and I said, Nick, what do you think happened? Do you think that was your mom? And he said, yeah, it sounds like that was the ghost of my mom, that led these people to find the car. And, so that kind of challenges, a popular notion within Christianity that all ghosts are demons in disguise. Because I don't see why a demon would want to save that boy, but I could understand why God might allow his deceased mother to attract enough attention to that scene.
So you're presenting this story as an example of God's providence.
That's right.
Under difficult circumstances.
Right.
And that is an interesting slant on things, because today, when we hear ghost stories, we hardly ever hear about anything that has to do with the grace of God.
That's right.
It's always kind of on the dark side.
Right.
Yeah.
And this is a counterexample of that, and that's why I put it in there. And it has so many different weird phenomenon associated with it, the dreams, the naked woman, the angels that Nick saw. Nick also seems to have had a near-death experience, because when he was at the hospital, they told him his mom was dead, and he goes, I already know that. I saw mom in heaven with Jesus. Okay, so when I talked to Nick, I said, well, don't you think God went to extensive, elaborate lengths to save you? And he said, yeah. And I said, well, have you ever really thought about being a Christian? And I asked him to read the Gospel of John, and I told him I'd call him back the next day. And he did, and I called him back the next day. I said, what did you think of that? And he said, I read it, and I said, I just really couldn't understand why they didn't understand who Jesus was and why they treated him like that. And he really got it. And, I said, and I ended up leading Nick to Christ over the phone at the end of that interview. So that's where you get from paranormal witness to gospel witness. And it's all centered on this really kind of weird story that most Christians would stay away from. And I'm saying that, maybe our worldview should open up enough to allow some of these things in.
And may I say that this is a very captivating book. And Cris uses this anecdote to launch the entire book. And the thesis of the book is that maybe as Christians, we need to get back more into the mode of the spiritual realities that are presented in the Bible.
That's right. I think over time we've kind of demythologized the faith, where we've taken a lot of the supernatural elements out of the belief system that's presented in the Bible. And I think it has a very dynamic spirit realm presented that a lot of Western Christians don't really incorporate that into their worldview.
So there really is a provident God, and he's watching, and he has servants, the angels, who help him to do things in the world that oftentimes we don't recognize.
That's right. There's often a supernatural reality behind
this story, and I think your role, the role you ended up playing with Nick, that's absolutely amazing. Did you ever stop and think about yourself? Why was I the one, after all these years, that was able to deliver the gospel to Nick? What a privilege on your part.
Yeah, I mean, it's nothing but a privilege. I mean, for, on my own means, I would probably be in the gully. So, God saved me in a similar manner.
Wow. Well, you've been listening to the recollections, the storytelling of Cris Putnam. And the book is called The Supernatural Worldview. You'll find it in our online bookstore, Prophecy Watchers, and I think you'll be very interested in it. In closing, the thing I like about this book is that it gives you a basis for talking about the supernatural world with other people who may have questions. And you maybe up to now have not known how to answer those questions. Well, this book will kind of fill some of the blanks in, right?
Absolutely. It's really written to two audiences. It's written to refute the idea that naturalism is true, that only nature exists, this kind of atheistic notion, but it's also written to Christians to kind of educate them on where we have maybe have some of these gaps in our knowledge of what's going on in the supernatural realm.
Well, you did a great job, Chris.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. My throat is failing. My spirit is willing, but the flesh is a little weak right now. Hey, it's always good to talk to you.
It's great to be here on Prophecy Watch.
Thanks for coming by. Come by again as soon as you can.
Absolutely.
I'm Gary Stearman. Thanks for joining us on Prophecy Watchers, and remember, keep watching. We are. Thanks for joining us on Prophecy Watchers. You can find us on the web at prophecywatchers.com, where you can sign up for our free email newsletter, or follow us at facebook.com/prophecywatchers. In the meantime, keep watching, everybody, and we'll see you soon.